Boom. There we go. Okay,
There we
right at
are.
10:30. There we are. Now we're up to snuff. So, okay. So next up, so this officially starts PDH class number 2, and next up we have Mark Fly, who's PE from Fly Advising LLC, and with Aon in some respects, and was with Aon for most of his career. But he'll talk about that. Presenting failure is the option, which is one of my personal favorites. This lesson promises to be insightful, offering a fresh perspective on how failure drives innovation in the HVAC industry. For those turning in live, you could download the PDH certificate below. There's one PDH certificate for, and you could see the states that it's improved on down below. If you're watching this later on our YouTube channel or podcast, just look in the show notes or the video description notes, and you will see my email address, and you could email me, and I could get you that presentation. Mark's unique approach to problem solving has made him a trusted advisor in the field, and I'm thrilled to have him with us today. Mark, how are you? And take it away.
I'm doing great, Tony. This is one of my favorite presentations because it's all my opinion, so it's hard to be wrong.
No math. There's no math in here either.
There's no math. There's really no math in here. The state of New York saw no math, so they decided they weren't going to give me PDH.
That's right. That's right.
So, but anyway, that's kind of what this is about, and so this is kind of like hard lessons learned in my lifetime, in my 45 years in the HVAC industry, one way or the other. And there's a lot of autobiographical, especially toward the end. I'll tell you everywhere I've been. So, but anyway, we're going to talk about failure, and to me, learning, not being afraid to fail, not really, and failure is kind of the buzzword to get everybody's attention, but really not being afraid to try something new is very, very important if you want to be successful in whatever you do. And there are different kinds of failures. We're going to talk about those. We're going to talk about how to make your own luck through perseverance. And I always say that one of these days I'm going to learn from somebody else's mistakes. It doesn't seem like that's ever happened, but I'm going to keep trying.
It's good to say that. We're going to do that though.
Yeah, we're going to do that, and I probably have somewhere along the line.
I'm sure,
but it never feels that way. So,
yep.
So one of the things that especially, and I give this talk a lot to student groups and young professionals and people just starting their career, and especially people starting their career always feel like tell me the 5 steps to be a successful person, A, B, C, D. What do I have to do? What do I have to do? Well, there is no straight line in your career. And I know, Tony, you know that you've been kind of all over the map on the things you've done to get where you're at. And so was I, so what success really looks like is a whole lot of backtracking, a whole bunch of trying different things. And some of it's luck, but, a lot of it is just never miss an opportunity. But an opportunity comes up, grab it, recognize it, grab it, go do it. I always used to tell people when I interviewed them at Aon that the people who were really successful were those that went out and found something. No one ever wrestled you to the ground to do extra work, take extra work away from you. So, keep trying, and your attitude has more to do with your success than the man keeping you down in reality. So,
100%. And can I break in and say something real quick? I forgot to mention this. So sorry, Mark, but if you're watching this, our next giveaway session, we're going to pull the questions from here, almost all the questions. So just wanted to make sure everybody's paying attention for that reason. So
if we're going to talk about failure, failure always is, by Cambridge Dictionary, is the fact that something does not work as it should. But I always like to say it doesn't work as expected. We all have our own biases that we create in our lives and through our life experience. And we have things that we think should work this way. And they don't always work that way. And a lot of my career was spent in some kind of laboratory environment. I was the lab rat, I was always the guy doing stuff. And I'd bring young people into our lab, and we'd do some lab test, and things just went completely sideways, and it didn't end up being anything like you thought it was going to be. And I'd get really, really excited, and they all thought I was crazy. it's always, damn it, we're going to learn something new. We're going to find out something that somebody never knows because no one's ever screwed this up this bad before, right? So those are the kind of things that, we have these expectations of how things are supposed to work in air conditioning or in life or anything else. And many times they don't work that way. It's just this, it just doesn't work out, but that's okay. So one of the guys that I like that has written some of the best stuff on failure and innovation is Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon. And Jeff says if the size of your failure isn't growing, you're not going to be inventing at a size that can actually move the needle. So most of my career has been around some kind of innovation, and everybody wants to innovate. Everybody wants to be an innovative person, make something new, make a difference in the world. And to do that, you have to try wild and crazy stuff. And you have to, if you get an idea and you try it, that's what keeps going. A lot of that stuff, most of that stuff won't work out. Just be real honest with you. That's, and we're going to talk a little bit about that, but,
right.
But the fact that you keep trying, that's what really makes a difference. And the other point that Jeff makes is he always likes to divide failures into two types of failures. There's the good failure and the bad failure. And experimental failure, when you try something new and it doesn't work, that's the kind of failure you should be happy with because you're always going to learn something from that. Those are the things that are going to, move the needle in business. And for Amazon, they had things like the two examples he gave was Fire Phone and Google Plus. I remember Google Plus didn't really fly.
It was terrible.
Fire Phone, I didn't even see it failed so fast it went right by me.
I've never even heard of it.
I never heard of it. So
right.
Apparently they were going to Google was going to get in the phone business. Apparently that never worked out. So, at least not yet. There's also an operational failure. And one of the things that happens in business, especially as you get involved with bigger companies, and if you're in a production environment or any of those kind of things, there's a lot of talk about, net zero failure, Lean Six Sigma, that's operational failure. Operational failure is when you know how to do something, you have a procedure, and you don't do a good job following it. If you have the formula to do something, and we all in our jobs have both experimental and operational. I don't care how boring your job is. You have some opportunity to innovate and some opportunity that you have to follow certain rules. The IRS does not like you getting terribly creative when you fill out your tax form. So that's an operational failure that you kind of need to do every year.
They're such sticklers.
They're such sticklers, but there are certain things that you just have to do. If you're running a company, people really get upset if you don't do payroll right. So there's certain things that you need to do by the formula, by the book. But there are always ways that you can find innovative ways to do that faster or better or more accurately. So there's some innovation part of that too. So for Amazon, Jeff just said they've built hundreds of fulfillment centers, basically the Amazon warehouses, and they've taken, especially since COVID, they've taken over the world. I know we buy, it seems like half the stuff we buy or more is from Amazon anymore. So it's great. It just sometimes it shows up the same day. So they have all these fulfillment centers all over the world, and they've got really good at doing that. They have a formula to do that. If they have a disaster in opening up a fulfillment center, that means somebody wasn't paying attention. They weren't really doing the things that they knew how to do. So,
and that's the unacceptable operational failure.
That's the unacceptable operational failure. Right. That's the stuff that the net zero failure guys are talking about manufacturing. That's the lean process, the Lean Six Sigma.
Love it.
All those things that management people have focused on. But one of the problems is people get completely focused on that and didn't realize that that you have to try things new and fail to innovate. So like I said, when you're developing a new product or service, experimenting in some ways, those are the good kind of failures. And if you really want to succeed and get successful and do new things and make a difference in the world, you have to try new things. You have to make a podcast, right, Tony? So
Yeah, and you got to fail at that
and you got to fail at
for
that.
years.
Some of that isn't going to work for you too.
I had a guy message me the other day. It's along this topic of, hey, I'm trying to get sponsors. I just started online and I've got this, website I'm trying to build teaching, and I want folks to sponsor me. And I said, well, you got to build an audience and to do that. And he said, how do you do that? I said, post 2 to 3 times a day on the 5 major platforms for 5 years, and you might start seeing some traction. I mean, you got to learn how to do it, and it takes a lot of work. So
not all of it's the right thing to do, right?
That's right.
So one of the things that is instilled in us is when we go through school is in school every question has a right or wrong answer. Like I said, I like this presentation because it's my opinion, but if in school they ask you your opinion, that's usually a trick question. And
Funny.
my wife is a lifelong educator. She just retired from being a associate vice president of academic affairs at a university, and her PhD is in curriculum and instruction. And so being married 47 years, she knows a little bit about air conditioning. I know a little bit of what she does. So so it's very important when you're trying to teach somebody something. You're going to have questions at the end of this for prizes, right? So there's a right or wrong answer to all those questions. In real life, usually it's not a right or wrong answer. It's a better answer or a worse answer. And there are many, many different ways to do things, many different answers to a problem. And what you're really looking for, if you're an innovator or an entrepreneur, is you're looking for the best answer or a better answer. And a lot of times that's a matter of opinion. It's just one person may think that's the best answer, or somebody else may not think it is. When more people think it is than don't, then you're successful, right? But there's not one answer to most questions in life or in air conditioning. There's so a lot of my presentation is just some famous people that I've run into. I mean, famous people that I admire that have said quotes. Colin Powell said, "There's no secret to success. It's the result of preparation, hard work, and learning from failure." I actually have a physics degree, not an engineering degree. So, like I said, I have a contorted life to get where I was, but took quantum mechanics and decided physics wasn't for me anymore. So but I still like Albert Einstein. He said a person who never made a mistake, never tried anything new.
Oh my gosh. Isn't that so true? I have these talks sometimes with manufacturers or other rep firms, and they're trying to do more online. They want to do more online, and we've done a little bit, so we've got a few years under our belt. And I end up talking to them for about an hour. And at the end of the day, I'm like, all right, what's preventing you from doing this? They're like, we're just worried it's not going to look that good, or it's not going to be that good. And I said, well, I can cure that for you right now. It's not going to look that good. It won't. It shouldn't, because you've never done it before. If I was to build a house right now, it would have a lot of problems to it. But by the 15th house, I probably would get pretty good at it. But it's the same thing. But that's what I love the quote about Albert Einstein. Like, it's not supposed to be that way. And I'm sure you're going to talk about fear and the failure stuff. But like, if there's no fear of failure, there's no reason to not do it. So it all goes back to like the fear and stuff like that for me. But anyway, that's my opinion too. So I can say what I want on that.
That's right. So Thomas Watson was actually the guy that started IBM, International Building Business Machines. And you look at the dates, 1914 to 1956. And he said somewhere along in his career that the fastest way to succeed was to double your failure rate. Now, I don't, I grew up with computers. I learned, I did not learn success. I learned how to use a slide rule. I was never good at it because calculators emerged when I graduated high school. So, when I graduated college, the first personal computer that year came out. So
wow.
I really grew up. I've seen technology change tremendously in my career. And, and IBM was the man back in the days. You know, we had a big IBM 360 mainframe in college that I programmed things on, and you know that they were the industry leaders. I don't think of IBM as the leaders anymore. You know, they don't.
Right.
You know, they don't even put their own name on their own computers anymore. They use some other name, right?
Right.
So, you know, if you looked at the battle of the personal computer, it was Apple versus IBM, and Apple obviously were more successful over time. Although, you know, the Microsoft Bill Gates that was based on the IBM machine. Probably is more or more prevalent, but it's not IBM leading that charge anymore. So somewhere along the lines, they forgot what their founder said. To me, it just, you know, you don't see that. So that happens with big corporations, and I'll talk about that here in a minute. So Michael Jordan was great. Talks a lot about failure. I failed over and over in life. That's why I succeed. I can't accept failure, but I can't accept not trying. So that's really the important thing is getting to the point where you feel confident enough that you just try stuff. And as I advanced in my career, you know, you get more fearless as you get older because, you know more people. You're not so concerned about, you know, getting your next job. I always said, you know, I could probably make 3 phone calls and have some kind of job if I wanted one. I'd have to move across the country. It might not be exactly what I wanted, but I could have a job. I could put food on the table. So at some point you get where you're more confident, you're more willing to try things, but you know, but fear of failure holds a lot of people back. And I'd say it holds most people back at the end of the day. And if you look at people that lead corporations, they're fearless. I mean, the guy that started Aon, Norm Asbjornson, absolutely fearless.
Right, really? He doesn't have that kind of like
he never, you know, never was afraid to try something new. And, you know, I always told people when I talk about Norm, you know, 500 is a good batting average in baseball. Norm didn't have better than 500. At least half the stuff we tried didn't work.
Do you find that to be a characteristic of people who are in the Norm success, like highly successful people?
Highly successful people are that way. You know, they're fearless, and they're, you know, I always said I probably could not have run a big company like that because my ego's not big enough. You also have to have this big ego where you make a decision and you're absolutely convinced within yourself, whether it works or not, that you know. And I always say a lot of those guys, the current CEO of Aon is a lifelong friend of mine, Gary Fields. And you know, if I went up to Gary and said, "Have you ever failed?" Of course I've never failed. You know, he'd tell you that. He just redefines success, you know.
Right.
You know, he doesn't call it failure. He just calls it, well, that was just a step, you know. That was just a step to get where we needed to be. So that's the way people that are really successful, but you can't hesitate. If you're a leader of a major company, you can't hesitate. You just have to go.
Right.
And if it doesn't work, you fix it. Right. No big deal. You'll bankrupt, you just fix it. You just do it again. I've known so many people that did that over and over again.
Wow.
Mark Zuckerberg, the biggest risk is not taking a risk. So Henry Ford, failure is an opportunity to begin again more intelligently. You know, a lot of these people that are famous inventors tried over and over again. So what happens when big companies, and Howard Hess talks about it from Darden School of Business, is because they get this culture where they're trying to be 99% defect free, operational excellence. It kind of squashes the innovation in the company. So you have to have, if you're leadership at the top of your company, and one of the good things about my career at Aon is we always had very high risk takers who weren't afraid to try something new. But if you get in a company where it gets so big and so bureaucratic that everyone's trying to mitigate risk all the time, you know, Howard Hess says it's like a sumo wrestler sitting on a small gymnast. You just can't accept failures.
Is that common, Mark, in big corporations?
It is very common in big corporations. And I think
easier
that's what
for the-
happened to IBM and
Right.
in a lot of places.
You get all these separate divisions, and they're all
Right.
looking out for their own thing.
Right.
And if this fails, it's going to be perceived bad in their department.
Right.
And they're not distinguishing between the operational and experimental. But it seems like it's equally as hard for a small company that doesn't have a lot of resources to innovate. Is
Right.
there a sweet spot there? Like the $50 million a year company has a better chance, or I don't know. I guess Steve Jobs started in his garage. So what do I know?
Yeah. I mean, it's the thing that happens in big companies is if they fail, then they tend to punish the people that failed. And, so you've thrown away that great learning opportunity.
Right.
And you may even fire that person, and they learned a lot from failing.
So the guy who goes to his boss and says, "Hey, we're here in the market. This might excuse me. This might do well in the market. Here's what we're thinking. We'd like a budget to try it. Yada yada yada." That should be encouraged rather than, "Okay, here's your budget. If it fails, you're fired." Right? That's not promoting innovation.
And that's a lot of what happens. And
is it?
And so what happens in these big corporations is they get less and less innovative over time.
Mm-hmm.
And so a big corporation that's been very good at that is Google. If I look at Google, and the chairman of Google, and I've personally been involved with a couple of things with Google. Google used to have a division. I think they call it something else now, but they used to have a division called Google X. So Google set aside a certain part of their profits every year to go into Google X. And Google X was a think tank where they would just take all these wild and crazy ideas from outside of Google or inside of Google. Any employee or anyone could go to Google and get a grant to try this wild and stupid, crazy thing that nobody wanted to try. And I was involved with one in the air conditioning business. I'm not going to say who the company was because they've spun them off. But it was in the residential side of the market, and they had this great idea. They came in and Google funded this, got everything going under the Google X. And then at one point when it got successful, looked self-sustainable, it was making enough money to pay the payroll, and they didn't need Google anymore. Google went out and did a survey of a bunch of Google users, right? And said, "Hey, do you think Google should be in this market?" And basically the response came back is, every time I say something in around my Alexa, 12 ads end up in my Facebook page 2 minutes later. I don't want Google listening to me through my air conditioning in the bedroom, so
right.
So basically Google spun that off as a separate company, and it's a very successful company today.
Wow.
And they've done this over and over again. So it's just a think tank, but
Google
feels like innovation is that important, and they learn enough through the process for their own self or incorporate into new businesses that they can do that. So, those are the kind of people, those are the kind of organizations that are very successful and grow very rapidly. And you see people like Amazon and Google and, Microsoft and Apple have done that over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the real innovative people.
One of the things I've seen too, I haven't personally been in those scenarios, but I love to listen to autobiographies of companies like Apple and the big Microsoft, Tesla, and stuff like that. One of the things I've learned too is when they get a thing they want to try, sometimes that doesn't work, but something else comes out of that.
Mm-hmm.
Like the iPod was kind of that's how that got developed. That's a unique story behind that. Like they didn't set out to develop it, but it just like, oh wait, what if we just do this? And so it's like when you go down a path of trying to achieve something, sometimes something pops up that you didn't know was working. You're like, oh, why is this working? Let's go down that path. So you go on another path. But
most inventions are accidents, right? It seems like. So, like I said, I was always a lab lad. I always, I've built 2 big labs in my lifetime. And, the thing that I always told anybody working for me is, I don't care if you try something new, but if you break it, you fix it, So one of the most important things, if you're going to be out there and you're going to be failing, and something that Norm taught me very well when I I worked for Norm almost 18 years. And one thing that I learned from him very quickly is if you've tried something new and it doesn't work, you do not want your boss finding out from somebody else that it didn't work. You want to be the first one to go in and say, hey, I screwed this up and here's my plan to fix it,
and bring a plan.
And bring a plan.
That's important too. I've learned.
Yeah.
Don't complain about something without a plan.
Yeah. Come in, bring a plan. The dirty little secret of life is it doesn't have to be a good plan. Because two things can happen. It's a wonderful plan. You're going to get great kudos from your boss. He's probably going to forget about the failure and say, this was a great way. Thanks. Thank you for recovering off this big bonehead mistake that we made. We tried something new. What did we learn? Right. If you got the right guy, that's the attitude. If it's a terrible plan, it's an opportunity for him to mentor you, which also builds your relationship with your boss better. And they'll say, oh no, I wouldn't do that. You should try this, this, and this. So, if you can't come up with a brilliant plan and you don't really know how to fix it, come up with some kind of plan.
Yeah.
To show some effort and show trying. So that's my number one rule for people entering the industry. Do not ever let your boss find out from somebody else.
Because why? Because it doesn't show you're accountable for it. It looks like you're trying to hide it.
Accountable for it. They will get the impression they will get may not be the impression you want them to get.
Right.
It may be exaggerated because people get excited.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just better if you're the first one there,
right,
so that when somebody comes and says, hey, Mark really screwed this up. What are you going to do about it? He can say, he's already talked to me. We got this plan. We're going forward. Forget about
that's
it.
Good.
So,
and it's important to share the bad news quickly too, not sit on it. I've learned.
Yeah. Not sit on it, and you don't have to, you want to share the things that are important. You don't want to share every time you transpose a number and something. But,
right. I mean, I've never made a mistake, so I'm just telling you what other people told me.
What other people told you.
I wish that were true, but then I would never learn anything, I guess.
Then you never learn anything. So like
I see Courtney shaking her head in the background there. So she gets it.
So, Thomas Edison, he was famous for saying he hasn't failed. He just found 10,000 ways not to, that won't work. That was the Gary Fields philosophy. I've never failed, but I found thousands of ways that don't do things. I always tell people, in my consulting business, I get asked, mostly by Aon, to come in and look at something they're doing. And I could, can you tell us how to do this? No, but I can tell you thousands of ways not to do it. Right? So,
don't do these. Here's a list of things.
Don't do these.
I've already tried. This won't work.
This won't work.
That's important.
Here's why it didn't work.
Yeah.
Maybe you can try it, make it work, but these are the things that happened to me last time. So,
yeah.
Experience is just really, people that have a lot of experience have lots of failures. They've seen a lot. So, but Thomas Edison said, in life, many many inventors have given up right before they were ready to succeed, just because they didn't get there. And so that perseverance of keeping at it, keep trying things, in the lab, you do a test and it doesn't work out quite like what you want. You're trying to get a better EER or IER on a unit. So, you raise the fan speed. Did the EER go up or did it go down? If it went up, went up, great. If it went down, don't keep going that direction. Go do something else, right? So that many things are like that. You just have to keep tweaking them. One of my favorite historical figures was Winston Churchill. And if you looked at his career, it was a train wreck. He kind of did one thing. He won World War II for the British, right? The rest of his career was terrible.
I watched a documentary on him the other day and I had no idea. And I was like, man, this guy. And then he got booted out after the war. He
got booted out right after the war.
We've had enough out of you. We're done with you.
One of me and my wife's favorite movies is about him in World War II. And, there's one scene in there. I don't know whether this actually happened, but where a couple of people in, Parliament were saying, he has 100 ideas a day, 2 are good, and 98 of them are downright dangerous, So,
right.
So Winston Churchill always said, success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It's the courage to continue that counts. Success is going from failure to failure without losing your enthusiasm.
Love it.
And I love that quote, as you get down and things just aren't working, just, keep in there, keep trying, because it's going from failure to failure without losing your drive and your enthusiasm.
I love that. I interviewed a very successful online person once a couple of years ago. Well, a long time ago now, but I asked her, I said, what separates you from the people who don't make it? She said, I never stopped. I just kept going.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times I wanted to stop, but I just kept going. And that quote reminded me of that. It's how important that is. So,
well, and that was always somewhere in my psyche, somewhere my dad instilled in me years ago that, never pass up an opportunity. If somebody comes in and says, hey, we need somebody to do this. I never said no, whether I thought I could do it or not,
yeah, that's funny. The reason I'm sitting here in this chair is because when COVID hit, I was asked by my boss, Mark, hey, would you help get online so we can get in front of some people on some Teams meeting and Zooms meeting? And I had a little experience with that. And I said, yes, it wasn't part of my job, but I was like, yeah, sure, I'll help out if I can. So it's funny you say that, because that led to this whole,
look what happened, right?
this whole new career change for me,
right.
Which has been a great thrill in my life. So, yeah.
So like we've been saying, losers quit when they fail, winners fail until they succeed. So,
yeah, I like it.
Being from Oklahoma, I have to talk about T-Boone, and
what, he an oil guy? Was something to do with
an oil guy. And I always love this because, being a lifelong engineer and working with engineers, I always called it analysis paralysis. We love to be,
yes.
And I like to say, when I started out in my career, I wanted to be, 80 to 90% sure something was going to work before I'd pull the trigger. I always said Norm needed to be about 20% sure that it was going to work before he pulled the trigger. That's the reason he just scared the hell out of all of us. And over time, and him beating on me, I probably got closer to 50%.
Nice.
If it's 50-50, I could do it,
right.
But that's the reason I didn't end up leading Aon, right? I knew I could do that. So T-Boone called that the ready, aim syndrome, which many engineers fall into because we're very analytical and we want to get everything just perfect right before you pull the trigger. And sometimes you just have to go.
And the funny thing is about seeking perfection is it doesn't exist. Like, there is no such thing anyway. And it's the biggest thing that keeps me, if there's something that keeps me from doing something, shipping something, launching something, it's that, perfection thing.
And that's that engineer in you, that's just
100%.
It's part of our psyche.
Yeah.
And I look at, I like to tell people that Norm, who started Aon, he was the Steve Jobs of the HVAC industry. He's very successful, tried new things. Norm's emphasis was to be first to market. When he had a new idea, he wanted to launch it tomorrow, whether engineers were ready or not.
Wow.
We used to hide drawings from him because if he saw it, he'd be sending it to somebody. He'd come into your office, make sure that you get all these covered up. Don't let Norm see him when he walks by.
Oh, that's so funny.
Whereas Steve Jobs was really big on, everything that had to ship had to be very high quality, but they didn't necessarily have to be first to market. So it was just a slight variation on emphasis, but they were really the same guys. They were very, very much driven to be that. And of course, Steve Jobs did that by very much controlling what happened at Apple. So, I'm not an Apple guy. I don't have an Apple phone. I don't have because I can't mess with the settings because there are no settings in Apple, right? It just works.
That's funny.
But I like to mess with it. Being an engineer, I have to tweak things. So,
yeah.
So, but I appreciate that. But my daughter, who's very tech dependent, but not very tech savvy, she has Apple stuff and loves it. So she doesn't want to mess with it. So, Calvin Coolidge was another, famous president that basically slogan was press on, very, very much into it. So let's talk a little bit about, like I said, most things were invented by accident. So let's talk about some famous failures. Cornflakes, which was the world's first breakfast cereal, was developed by William and John Kellogg. John was a doctor. They basically were running the equivalent of a nursing home in the late 1800s. And they were boiling grain so that their residents who didn't have good teeth could have something to eat. And one day they burnt it, basically left it on the stove too long, dried all the water out, made this flaky stuff in the bottom, and burn it. Everybody else would have just scraped that out, thrown it in the trash, start over again. So, hey, this is kind of cool. Right. And that's how cornflakes got created, basically.
So before that, there was no breakfast cereal. It wasn't.
They were the very first packaged breakfast cereal.
Got it.
So the very first breakfast cereal got invented because somebody burnt their mush, right?
I'll be darned.
So dried their mush out. Walt Disney, who was always created this huge empire, Disney World, Disneyland, big movie and television empire, at the age of 22 was fired from a newspaper because he lacked imagination and had no good ideas.
So funny. Lacked imagination and had no good ideas.
So he went to California, drew a picture of a mouse, and created a whole career around it. The Wright brothers, who invented basically the airplane, were bicycle mechanics who wanted to create a flying machine. And, after hours and hours of countless work, they got the plane off the ground for 10 seconds. That was their definition of success.
Mm-hmm.
I swear when I was a kid jumping dirt piles with my bicycle, I could be off the ground for 10 seconds.
That's right. That's what you thought. Good thing they didn't have video cameras then. You'd be like, I went like an inch off the ground. Right.
Yeah. Us old guys are very fortunate because there wasn't YouTube and phones.
There you go.
We didn't get all our mistakes recorded, right?
Oh my gosh. Thank goodness.
Thank goodness. So this is one of my favorites. Bubble wrap was created as in the 1960s as this really cool wallpaper that nobody really wanted. Psychedelic, I guess, too many acid trips or something.
Oh my gosh.
And basically they tried to make this textured wallpaper. Nobody wanted it. And it wasn't till IBM started shipping their brand new personal computers. They're about 1989, 1980, or 79, 1980. And UPS was tearing them up, in shipping, and they were arriving broken, that they decided to wrap it in this new wallpaper to ship it. And it became the packing material that we have today. And
that's crazy.
And I get tons of stuff with bubble wrap on it in my Amazon packages, right? So,
yeah.
So, but it was really never started out to be a packing material. Their second idea was to use it for house insulation, and actually you can buy basically bubble wrap house insulation. I put some in my attic, in my attic storage area to kind of keep the attic area a little bit cooler in the summertime. So
that's one of those things we were talking about earlier, how you start down one path, but then something else happens that you had no idea, was going to happen. So that's really cool.
Yeah. So in the avionics industry, they were making airplane parts and doing a lot of machining and high precision machining, and they'd get flash corrosion after they did a machining operation. So they were looking for a compound that would displace water, and they came up, and so they tried many different things and came up with what they called WD-40. WD-40 was basically the 40th formulation, because WD-39 wasn't quite good enough. And so after many years, they figured out this compound that they could put on machine parts to keep them from rusting and keep them kind of lubricated and rust. And then they noticed that all their employees were putting in mason jars and taking home and oiling their hinges and their car doors. And so they said, hey, this is could be a great thing. Package it in an aerosol can in 1958. So it's, 66 years old.
Weren't you telling me WD stands for water displacement?
Water displacement, formula number 40.
I posted that last time we did this presentation. I posted that on social media. I said, did it WD stand? And I got a bunch of comments. Yeah, no kidding. You didn't know that? I'm like, you didn't know that. Get out of here.
Yeah.
I never heard that before. Now I might get some comments in the chat that everybody knows that, but I don't know.
Yeah, you didn't know it.
I didn't know it.
You do now.
Somebody
know.
said, Ryan said, fail, FAIL, first attempt in learning. I think that's good.
Yeah.
And
Great.
then Jeffrey Deal says, PE or professional guesstimator, you decide. Totally get that. I thought there was another comment here about failure, but a lot of comments like along the lines of, yeah, you just got to keep going. And
yeah. So James Dyson, basically the Dyson, vacuum cleaner, which is kind of a high-end vacuum anymore.
Mhm.
You can tell this guy was an engineer. He says he tested 5,271 prototypes. He didn't say 5,250. He said 5,271. He kept track prototypes before he finally found something that worked. And so he went to all the American and European vacuum companies trying to sell his idea. Nobody wanted it. So he had to create his own company, his own manufacturing operation to make the vacuum, because nobody believed in what he did. And very successful vacuum cleaner company today. So
all right, here comes this Dyson guy again wanting to change
here comes
a little switch.
Right. So since we're in the air conditioning business, we have to talk about air conditioning. So kind of the history of refrigeration started in 1748 when William Cullen, a Scottish physician, found out that if he put a vacuum on some diethyl ether, which by the way was one of the very early refrigerants that was used, that it would boil in a vacuum, and then the little vacuum jar would get cold. Frost to roll around the outside of the vacuum jar. He said, "Oh, this is cool." Wrote a paper. Nothing ever happened with it. 100 years later, a physician, John Gorey, and doctor in Florida, was fighting the yellow fever epidemic and noticed that his patients did better in the wintertime when it was a little cooler and less humid than they did in the summertime when it was hot and humid. So, he decided that he was going to cool his hospital to have a better success rate with his patients. And he needed ice. But at that period of time, ice was expensive, because in the summertime, if you wanted ice, it was ice that was either harvested off a lake and shipped down to Florida, or harvested off icebergs and shipped down and kept in cold warehouses. So a lot of transportation, lots of labor. Obviously, it melted in the warehouses, so the guys in the warehouses had lots of loss. So the hotter it got, the farther the summer got, the more expensive the ice got, right? So he went back to Cohen's invention and decided he was going to make a machine that makes ice. And so he made basically the first ice machine, blew air across the ice. And I always consider Gorey the father of air conditioning, since I never worked for Carrier. So,
I was going to ask you that question, but I didn't want to start a big.
That's a personal opinion. I always like when I give this talk for, but how many Carrier guys are in here? I'm going to insult you all. So
that's right.
So Gorey figured out this, and so he's in 1848 he's going to go patent it, and basically these guys that were cutting icebergs up, they didn't want against him and sued him and kept him from getting a patent. So he was never able to patent his basically refrigeration machine, because it was the first vapor compression. It had a compressor, it had an expansion valve. Basically, Gorey invented the vapor compression refrigeration cycle to make his ice. Now comes Willis Carrier. Another 100 years goes by, 150 years since Cullen's discovery. He's an experimental engineer back in the turn of the century, and back in the turn of the century, the engineering professions was really, you were the engineer and the contractor, the installer. Basically, they would hire an engineer, and they put the unit in the building. And so Carrier took what Gorey had done and basically commercialized it, and put all those pieces together. And he put those pieces together for a particular application where they were not trying to cool and air conditioning people. They were trying to dry out the air at a printing press, which in the hot summertime in Brooklyn, the paper would all stick together in the printing press and the ink would smear. So he was hired to figure out how to dehumidify the area. So really the first air conditioner was really a dehumidifier. That was, it was a DOAS machine. It was a DOAS machine, right?
Yeah.
So
Oh, it was a DOAS. It was dedicated.
Basically, you know, it was just dehumidifying outside. I mean, dehumidifying the air, and back then, that's the only thing you did was just ventilate because you didn't have air conditioning, right? So,
Right.
so you know, I always say Willis Carrier was the Bill Gates. He didn't write the Microsoft operating system. He bought it from somebody. Actually sold it before he actually could close the deal on buying it. You know, gutsy guy tried something new, right? And created a whole industry out of it. So he was a great marketing guy, great innovator, built it into a huge company, and you know, really Carrier brought air conditioning to the mass markets. You know, that was what they did. So this is a picture of me on the right, and the current CEO of Aon's father. Like I said,
that's Gary's dad.
That's Gary's dad.
Oh yeah.
Actually, is William Gary Fields. He always went by Gary, and Gary Fields, who's the CEO of Aon, actually name is Gary, not William Gary. So it's really not senior and junior. And if you really wanted to piss Gary off, you called him Junior.
Okay, I won't do that.
Don't call him that.
I will not do that.
But very, very much a very innovative guy, very sharp guy, no follow through, you know, absent-minded professor. But me and him in an ice machine company in 1986. So there are certain people that were enormous mentors to me in my career, and Gary's dad was one of them. Gary made his first sales call on me in 1980 when he started working for his dad after being a service tech. So
wow, it's a small community, isn't it?
It's very small community. I always say, you know, when I talk to student groups, I always say there's only 24 of us. We all know each other. It feels like that way. But you know, I always say in air conditioning, there's 1 degree of separation. If you don't know somebody, you know somebody that knows them. I just almost guarantee you.
1 degree, no pun intended with that.
Yeah, 1 degree.
It is a very small community.
It's a very small community.
Be careful who you say, if you say anything, or like if you do anything wrong, you know, don't want to.
Yeah, be careful how you leave companies and don't burn your bridges.
That's right. You know, that's a good way to say
it. You may end up working for him. The guy that So me and Gary designed a Cox Hospital in Springfield, Missouri with mammoth heat pumps back in 1981. That was his first job he ever sold, and one of the first jobs I ever engineered working for. So I started out working for a consulting engineering firm. They basically went bankrupt. The office I was working in went bankrupt, and they told me I could move to St. Louis, but I was in Springfield, Missouri, and I'd spent a lot of time in East St. Louis doing energy studies, and decided that was not a place I wanted to live.
Right.
I couldn't live in a big city. I was a small town boy. I eventually got over that, but and so I went to work down in Arkansas for a sheet metal contractor who in the mid 90s we got a job where we didn't have enough room to put all the ductwork in. It was a design build job. After we got it, we figured out we didn't have room for the ductwork to feed the building. So Gary Sr. Came up with the idea of building a refrigeration system that put 40-degree air out.
Wow.
You know, cold air system, and we put in that building, and we built it, and we went to Temp Master in Kansas City, who he represented, and tried to talk him into building it for us, and they wouldn't. Kind of the Dyson story. And and so we said, well, heck, we've got a manufacturing plant. We can do this, right? So
were you nervous? Were you guys nervous about it working? Or
no, we were stupid. We were just fearless. So we started a company doing cold air, and then, you know, it's mid 80s, and thermal storage is huge because of demand charges that were happening. California and Florida, East Coast and West Coast, basically 3 Mile Island happened in 83. So no more nuclear. They couldn't build power plants. They had to buy from the local utility under regulations at the time. So, you know, had these huge demand charges. So if you put thermal storage in and build ice all night and then burn it off during the daytime,
That's right.
you could lower your utility bill greatly because they measured the peak amp draw
That's right.
during peak hours.
You got
which is
hit
the middle
hard
of
with
the day.
that.
You know,
Yeah.
so huge amount of business. And then in 87, Reagan deregulated the utility industry so that you could buy power not from your local utility. You had to pay them a distribution charge, but if you're in California, you could buy power from New Jersey if you wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
And that killed the ice machine. All the demand charges went away. The whole industry collapsed. We went bankrupt.
Finish that, huh? Yeah.
So my experience with that was we were having hard times. We were a bunch of Arkansas and Missouri contractors dealing with contracting firms owned by lawyers in California. It was a bad, what terms and conditions, we didn't pay any attention to that kind of stuff.
Right.
In our part of the world, a
sign it,
handshake,
right.
your world was your bond, right? Is a phone call, that's good enough. Well, we weren't getting paid.
Yeah.
So we were pretty rough. Partners were starting to drop out. I am 27 years old. I have a 3-year-old child and an 18.5% interest rate on my house. Thank you, Jimmy Carter.
Man.
And I get a phone call from our lawyer saying, "Hey, Mark, I need you to sign something." And I said, "Wait a minute. I'm not a corporate officer. Why would you want me to sign something?" "Oh, didn't Paul tell you? You're treasurer. I need you to sign the chapter 11 papers."
Congratulations.
Congratulations. You're the new treasurer of the bankrupt corporation.
That's right. Your first act is to bankrupt yourself. There you go.
Just to bankrupt myself. So I was scared to death. Thought I was going to lose my house, and went and found my own lawyer and found out that we were a corporation. That wasn't going to happen. But
yeah.
So that was a scary time. But I learned a lot. I learned a lot about corporate. I did a bunch of research on corporate law there. So I went to work for one of the Nortec companies, Governor, in 1989. Worked there 17 years and went up to, in 2006, came up to Aon because we'd had 4 general managers in the last 5 years I was there.
Yeah.
And they were going through a lot of people, and it just wasn't the company I went to work for. So I came up and went to work for Norm. His first job, he came into my office and said, "Hey, we've got this Canadian division that's having trouble. I'm going to fire the general manager. I need you to go up there for 3 months to hold it together. You know something about building air handlers. I just need you to run it for 3 months. You're driving from Oklahoma City, where Governor was, to Tulsa every Monday, and we hadn't found a house." My wife, being an educator, she always moved 9 months before she did because she had to finish her contract. And so I commuted. I said, "Okay, 3 months." I was there 2 years, back and forth to Canada.
Sounds right.
And then we closed it. Just because for various reasons. But it just wasn't a good fit for Aon at the time. So
yeah.
So I learned that I did not want to run a company at that point, because if you're at the very top, the only decisions you get to make are the nastiest, ugliest decisions.
Yeah, man.
The easy ones everybody else already made.
A lot of attorney calls when you're at the top.
A lot of attorney calls. So fail. And although along the lines, I got to know a lot of people. I did a lot of stuff with ASHRAE. I was sat on the ASHRAE board of directors while I was working at Aon. I came in to Aon as director of engineering. Got to build a $50 million lab. I've in ASHRAE, I've got the Distinguished Service and Exceptional Service Awards, which means you really can't say no.
Right.
I'm a fellow, and I'm a distinguished lecturer. I retired from Aon this summer. Aon is paying for my retirement. They gave me lots of stock along the time, which when I first came there, I thought, "Oh, that's nice." But, it turns out that's what I'm living on now, and I'm not going to have any problems. So I think I've been fairly successful, but it was only after failing time and time again at many different occupations. So, I guess my message is just, don't give up, keep going.
Yep. Excellent. Like I said in the beginning, Mark, I love this presentation. I think it's so super important and we have a lot of design engineers, consultants watching this. What would your advice to them be? It's weird because if you're a consultant, like you don't like taking the risk, like with a 40-degree air and stuff like that. That's a scary thing to do. And if you're not in charge of the firm, you probably don't have that capability anywhere. What would you say?
I spent, one of the things I did while at Aon is I spent a lot of time in the government affairs, really created the government affairs part of Aon and fighting regulations, because I'm a firm believer that the consulting community needs to have some free reign to try things new. That's where the great ideas come from.
Gotcha.
One of the things one of the reasons we didn't build a $50 million lab because we wanted to better the industry. It's a marketing tool.
Right.
And it was an excuse to get customers in to come talk to us, because all the great ideas, having run 2 big engineering departments, at times I had over 200 engineers reporting to me. What you find out is an air conditioning, R&D engineer will create some of the wildest, coolest stuff that nobody wants to buy in the world, because we don't know what the needs are. So it was always very, very important to get customers come in and bring us your problem. Tell us what you're having trouble with. Let us know what we need to work on and do. Let us create something and it almost always happens like John Gorey and his ice machine. You're trying to solve a problem for somebody. It becomes a product. It becomes a business, becomes an industry.
Awesome.
And that's the story of Aon. That's the story about every air conditioning company. If you really go back to the roots to see how they came, they were trying to solve somebody's problem and built a whole business around it. All the products came out that way.
Excellent. Well, thank you again, Mark. I appreciate you. If you're watching this on the website, don't forget to go down below and you could download your PDH certificate. If you have any issues with that, you can email me. If you're watching this on the future on our YouTube channel or listening on our podcast, you can look in the show notes or the video description. My email will be in there, and I'm glad to send you the PDH certificate. So right now we're going to take a few minute break, and then we're going to come back and do a giveaway based on the questions here. We've got some of these great mugs. The PDH part is done now. We're going to go do the giveaway, then an intermission. Then our next PDH starts at, let's see here, it's 11:30, 12:30 is our next PDH. So Mark, you want to hang out with us for a minute, or you got to run?
I can hang out for a while.
Excellent. Hang out. I'm going to put.
I'm retired, man.
That's right. You're like, I want to hang out all day. So just, I'm going to put us in the waiting room. I'm going to put on some music for about 5 minutes. We'll take a quick break and we'll come back and do the giveaway. Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks.